You know, so we need to, and again, going back to my advocacy role, what are we doing in this country around birth that is causing us to have such horrible statistics? You know, we have to relook at that whole system. And we know, what is the evidence? The evidence is that when women are attended, now we're talking about home birth, so I'm going to talk about that evidence, attended by qualified providers with screening criteria. And when you read Cara's book, you'll see her vast experience in obstetrics. The outcomes are terrific. And if we look at the other countries in Europe where infant mortality and maternal mortality are very low, most of the births are attended by midwives. Home birth is a right of women. The healthcare system has transport in place. I'm very familiar with the UK because we have an exchange program with the UK for midwifery education. And the community midwife has hospital privileges. There's continuity of care. What do we do here to postpartum mothers? Oh, we discharge you, we'll see you in 6 weeks. What about the home visits? The critical time for breastfeeding and so on that is so typical of the home birth model. You know, so that is a real important part of the conversation because yes, we're here to talk about home birth, but women have to know the whole spectrum of choice, and we have to, in whatever she chooses, whether it's hospital, birth center, small community tertiary care center, that woman needs the right to have safe, good care, and she should have control over her birth. And that's what we need to fight for in this state and in the United States.
And that is close to what I was going to ask you, which is the AMA, the American Medical Association, and ACOG, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, has declared that the hospital is still the safest setting for labor. And I'm wondering, on a kind of larger level, we were talking about individual patients, but how you argue with that? Because there is, you know, despite statistics that are good, there's still a real prejudice against home birth in this country.
I think a lot of the prejudice is because the evidence is not being publicized. It's the anecdotes. And it's also the data supports, well, who is attending the birth. And there's lots of data out there.
No, I was going to say that you know, because for some reason there tends to be a negative viewpoint towards home birth in this country, what people tend to focus on is, for example, I'm finding this now that I'm getting some notoriety representing home birth, that, for example, Abby and Ricky worked on a 2020 segment that was shown the other day, and they said that they were equating home birth with free birth, which means you have no qualified attendant there. And when I was beginning this journey, Victoria sent me something from Kaplan about how there was a woman in Florida and she had a baby on her own with no one who knew anything, and she bled to death and hemorrhaged to death. So the people who are speaking out against home birth aren't making the necessary differentiations, which is partly why I wrote the book, and it's partly why I'm here tonight, to give people accurate information about risk. You know, childbirth is not without risk. But certainly, childbirth in a hospital is not without risk either. And so my idea is that we need to really break down and analyze the safety equation and see what factors are contributory towards safety. For example, I was recently with a couple. The dad is a doctor for Doctors Without Borders, and he's a Harvard PhD in public health, and he was the only person who spoke to this factor that I consider vitally important, anonymity. He didn't want his wife to be anonymous to her caregivers. He thought that that was important for her and important for her process of giving birth. And that trust translates into safety, and fear translates into potentially bad outcomes. I mean, it's not always a causal relationship, but certainly that factor needs to be addressed instead of people just jumping on the bandwagon thinking that technology is the only element of the safety equation. So.
I just wanted to say that I think human culture and midwifery is ancient. Modern obstetrics is fairly recent, and I feel like, you know, discussing free birth, women didn't traditionally just give birth like all alone somewhere. They had a community surrounding them. They had midwives. So the other thing is that I think that part of the way that obstetrics is going is just the way that our whole culture and society is going. We don't know anything anymore. The experts know everything, including how our body should function properly, okay? Where we should give birth, who should be delivered, it's all this stuff. So a lot of what I work with is the fact that people sit in desk chairs all day, they interact with electronic media, and they're highly stressed, and they may not eat healthy diets, they may not exercise well. And a lot of these women, of course, when they go to have a baby, maybe at an older age, they're not going to be able to even squat if they wanted to. I have clients, fertility clients right now, who actually can't squat, and I'm teaching them how to do it. So when it becomes that profoundly detached from your own body and the ancient knowledge of human culture that's been lost in some ways in modern times, you can see where modern obstetrics comes in. And a lot of women probably do very well with modern obstetrics because they're not oriented towards a home birth. But still, I'm oriented towards it, many people are oriented towards it, and we have the right to have our ancient birthright as women to give birth in a situation of our choice. So some women go to the hospital, some women should be able to go home and not have that be a problem. Stigma. Yeah.
And can you all speak a little bit to the difference between the training and the orientation between an OBGYN and a midwife, and then I guess a doula as well, which I think people are interested in the role of a doula?
Well, since I've got the mic, I'll just tell you a little bit about my training. I went into it subversively. I went into it knowing that I was going into it to learn it all and then do something completely different. So it was a very interesting journey because there I was hiding my tofu in opaque containers. I just want to be weird. It's weird enough, my orientation, so I don't need all the fluff around it. Oh, she has long hair, she eats tofu, whatever. It's all so silly. It has nothing to do with reality. Who cares what? We all have different hair, right? It doesn't even matter. But that used to be significant to people in my environment. But obstetrical training, it's kind of like a hazing. They want to exhaust you. You're up all day and all night, and it just becomes this sort of like clubby thing. And people say terrible things to women in labor in hospital environments, especially in the inner city. They clamp fallopian tubes during the 8th C-section of a Medicaid patient because they don't think they should have another baby. And it's completely unethical and horrible, and that's stuff that I observed during my residency. And I was like, this is not going to be how I practice. I need to know as much as these jokers and get out there and help people. It really, really disturbed me what I was seeing. People really were pushing their own agendas and imposing their will on people. And something that was expressed by colleagues often was, well, why would you want to have a baby at home? You don't have as much control. People are really into control. You got to let go of control when it comes to birth. There is a process that has to do with surrender. There's a whole hormonal cascade, and once you interfere with it, it's not the same anymore. You have to deal with the consequences the moment you interfere with that cascade. So medical training and obstetrical training, it's not designed to teach natural childbirth. I was taught how to do episiotomies and cesareans and procedures, and it's all very cool at one point, and then you're like, okay, now I want to learn how to not do those things. And okay, they're not looking over my shoulder, so I'm not going to cut. Wow, 9 pounds, 2 ounce baby came out, and a first-time mom, and she didn't even tear. They told me it couldn't be done, so I would prove these things to myself as it went along. So by the time I was done, I knew what was truly possible, and I joined a practice that did home births right out of residency.
Training.
In the United States, and I think it's unfortunate that there are so many different credentials for midwifery, which really confuses the public. There's the CNN, the Certified Nurse Midwife, which both Karen and I are. There's the CM, the Certified Midwife. There's the CPM, the Certified Professional Midwife. And then there are midwives practicing that do not have a licensed credential. Unlike in other places where there's one midwifery and the public knows what it is, knows their education. So right now, I briefly can only talk to you about the CNMCN and the CPM. In New York, in the early 1990s, midwifery became a profession, an independent profession, no longer part of nursing. That opened the way for, so up to this point,